Hello, welcome to Ask PCMag, where our tech experts answer your tech questions. I'm Dan Costa, editor-in-chief of PCMag.com, and I am joined today by John Burek. He runs our hardware team, which means he tests all of our laptops, desktops, and components that come into the lab. John, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, happy to join you, Dan.
We've got a question today about the new MacBook Pro 13-inch 2020 model. Reports say that, and including our reports say that the keyboard has been fixed. And this user wants to know, like, how do they make the choice between a MacBook Pro, the latest MacBook Pro, and a Windows laptop? How would you talk the user through that complicated decision?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, it's not that complicated for some folks because some folks are sort of in the Mac OS world and have been forever. And if you're used to using that ecosystem, you're probably just going to go with that laptop because you're a Mac person, so to speak. Same thing with Windows. Some people are just in that ecosystem and they wouldn't consider Mac because it's a whole bunch of relearning and a whole bunch of sort of paradigm shifting that they may not want to do. But the point being, if this reader is actually considering a MacBook Pro and sort of wondering about the alternatives, it sounds like they're being kind of flexible about which OS they want to work with. I mean, for the most part, though, it's kind of a religious issue for most folks.
Yeah, but are there features in the new MacBook that could lure a Windows user away, that people would say, look, I really want that?
Well, I mean, there's a few things that there aren't. I mean, to reverse that question a little bit on itself, you won't find a touchscreen in the new MacBook Pro, which is, a long-standing thing with MacBooks. Apple just doesn't do touch on their laptops. You do have on the new MacBooks, now standard across the line, this was actually a generation or so ago, the touch bar, which is a little strip in front of the keyboard, which adapts to the program that you're using, and you can, do a sort of shortcut to a certain palette in Photoshop or scrub through a timeline in Premiere. Those are the kind of things that you won't find on that was one of the things you won't find on a Windows machine, but a Mac user, would probably use it, but I don't know if that would be a reason to buy it just, in and of itself. On the MacBook Pro, you do have a very highly color accurate screen, which supports the P3 color gamut. For people who are creators, they're going to care about that kind of thing. There are some Windows machines for sure that have that as well, but when you're in the Mac world for the Pro, that's sort of considered a content creator's tool. So that's, something that is going to be there. The keyboard, I don't think anybody would say that the keyboard would take anybody from a Windows machine to a Mac. It might take people from a Mac to a Windows machine based on its previous generations of
but to be clear,
reliability.
The new keyboard is better, though. Tom Brandt tested it, and he's found the new keyboard on this model much better than previous models.
Yeah, I mean, ordinarily we'd have it in the lab there. We'd all be, tapping away on it and have our strong opinions on it. But Tom did look at it, and he was, much, very impressed that it's much improved. Apple did do in the last generation of the 13-inch a slight tweak to the mechanism underneath, but it wasn't sort of a wholesale difference, in terms of feel, or we don't know about reliability on that specific year ago model yet, but the thing that was the issue with the MacBook Pro for the last few years was that the keys were practically no travel. In other words, it was like typing almost like on a flat surface. And, some people took to it, some people didn't. With the new one, you've sort of reverted to the MacBooks from mid-2010s where you actually can see physical travel and you get sort of the physical feedback as opposed to sort of like just sort of the flat tapping feedback. In terms of other stuff that would keep you safe, for instance, on a Mac versus, an equivalent Windows machine, and again, this is qualifying this just with 13-inch laptops. You can get larger MacBook Pros, you can get larger Windows machines with sort of different ceilings. You do have a very high ceiling on storage in the new Mac, the MacBook Pro 13-inch. You can go up to 4 terabytes on it. I mean, there's a fair amount of Apple tax in there to get up that high, but that's an option there. A lot of Windows machines don't have the option to go that high if you need a lot of local storage. The other thing with one more thing is that the MacBook Pro also supports a 2560 by 1600 screen. A lot of standard Windows machines come with 1080p, which is slightly lower resolution, but you also have a 4K option, so you can also go higher. So a lot of sort of moving parts there.
Let's talk about that Apple tax. So, system for system, pound for pound, the MacBook Pro 13-inch compare to a similar Windows system?
Yeah, I mean, well, it depends on which SKU you're looking at or which model you're looking at in the line. Let's start with the base models, right? So the cheapest 13-inch MacBook Pro that you can get today is $1299. That gets you a generation back CPU, which I'll get to in a minute. And I believe it's 8 gigs of memory and a 256 hard drive. I'll have to check that. But basically, the sort of similar machines that compete with it, like the Dell XPS 13, the Microsoft Surface Laptop 3 in that same size zone, start at $999. There are some spec trade-offs there with some of them, but you're looking at a $300 delta there at the low end. The thing with the MacBook Pro is, and this is an interesting sort of wrinkle of it, which you don't really see with other laptops, is you have to go several stacks, or steps up the stack, I should say, to get to certain things. Where if you want, for instance, the most recent processor in there, an Intel 10th gen processor, you've got to opt for a $1799 unit. It's the same deal with the physical port connectivity. The low-end models have just 2 USB-C ports on them, but once you get up to that $1799 price point, you're getting 2 on each side, 4 total. So if you need a lot of physical plug-in connectivity, your baseline is a lot higher with the MacBook Pro, $1799.
All right, so there's always those hidden fees in there, and we should do our next show about docking stations and docking solutions.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, if you're buying a MacBook Pro, you're almost guaranteed to be wanting one within about a week or two, depending on what you own that you want to plug into it. Because again, USB-C only ports, I mean, you could have sort of funny dongles hanging off the side of it to plug in your old stuff. But for the most part, out of the box, you're going to be doing everything wireless. And actually, that's another thing that occurred to me is wireless. The new MacBook Pro actually does not support the new Wi-Fi 6 or 802.11ax. Not all premium Windows machines in that price zone do, but we're starting to see more of them do that. So I don't think that's a real big deal, maker or breaker for anybody at this point, but just something to know is that it's got okay wireless, which works fine for today. 2 or 3 years from now, maybe you'll wish you got something with AX.
I think Apple's actually putting that on the side of their boxes now. Got okay wireless.
I might have missed it. I don't know, but because there's so much text and cluttered stuff, no white space on those boxes at all, right?
Right, John. Thanks again for doing this with me. That's all great advice.
Oh, my pleasure.
That's Ask PCMag for today. If you've got more questions, you can ask them on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Just use the hashtag AskPCMag. Until then, we will see you on PCMag.com.